Okay, ironically, the start of this show has to be censored just for a moment, because if we don't self-censor here, or at least bleep out, I'm not going to self-censor what I say, but we sometimes have to censor what we post on YouTube, because otherwise I'll be banned by big tech if I say this. But I'm not going to say something just because of a threat of censorship from big tech. We're just going to be smart and strategic about this. So you can obviously find this for free. This is not a paywall trick. You can find this for free. The audio is on Apple Podcasts. You can find the video on Liz Wheeler Show Locals, lizwheelershow.com/locals. But what I have to say is very important. So I asked last night, I was talking to the Liz Wheeler Show community, all the VIPs over there. We were talking about the stories of the week. We were talking about Durham specifically, because just about every one of you wanted to discuss more about Durham's filing, about Hillary Clinton paying a law firm to spy essentially or infiltrate servers in Trump Tower, in Trump's home, and in the White House, and what this means. I mean, this is the proof that we've been waiting for. This is a smoking gun. This is absolutely beyond mind-blowing, of course. Whether there's going to be accountability or not, I think is the big question. But I was rereading the Durham filing itself yesterday just to, see if there was anything that I missed the first time, see if there was anything that stuck out to me the second time that I was perusing it. And the thought that I had while rereading this court filing wasn't even about the content of what I was reading. I literally sat there and I thought, listen, this is a presidential candidate, a Democrat, Hillary Clinton, who actually paid a law firm to contract a tech company or whoever it was to infiltrate the servers of another presidential candidate, the political opposition, in order to plant evidence to try to frame the presidential candidate for treason, collusion with a foreign country, in order to not only win the presidency, but then take down, Trump if he won, when he won, which she tried to do.
Unfortunately, I can't show you this part of the show, or the big tech overlords might delete this video and my channel. As you know, YouTube won't let me tell you the truth about COVID-19 or transgenderism and other important issues, even when I cite the specific studies. So if you want to watch the full uncensored version of this video, join me over on the Liz Wheeler Show community on Locals, lizwheelershow.com/locals.
There was an enterprising young journalist whose safety I now fear for, from the Daily Mail, who confronted Hillary Clinton about this report from Durham, or this court filing from Durham. And this is the video that she got. It's bone-chilling to watch Hillary Clinton. Take a look at this.
Hillary, Laura Collins, Daily Mail. Did you pay to spy on the Trump campaign? When are you going to comment on the spying allegations, Hillary? Did you pay for having spied on?
She reminds me of a Bond villain. And I don't mean to cast her as a character or as a caricature or to downplay the severity of what she did, but she's just so cold and so calculating and so unconcerned with accountability that it chills my actual bones. It chills my actual bones to see this woman. And again, I mean, what did I say? It's nothing to them to commit wrongdoing at a state and local level if they're willing to do this at the federal level. It's shocking. I'm Liz Wheeler. This is The Liz Wheeler Show. This plays into a bigger point that I want to make today. Again, this is my thoughtful meanderings as I am thinking about accountability And then thinking about, well, how do we, the people, if our justice system, meaning if the Department of Justice, which is under the control of Biden right now and Kamala Harris, if our Department of Justice isn't willing to hold Hillary Clinton accountable, if there's not going to be legal repercussions for what she did, at least at the current time, how do we, the people, hold accountable this apparatus which allows corruption? And I know this is philosophical, but it's a thought process that needs to happen, because we can't just sit here and count on other people, just the way that we can't sit here and count on Joe Rogan to be our savior against COVID tyranny. We can't even truly just sit here and hope that the Canadian trucker convoy comes here to the United States. We have to be able to take action too. And so I thought, well, what action can we take? What action can we take to hold the corrupt apparatus here in the United States accountable in a way that would actually be effective? I can sit here and talk all day long. You and I can go out to the voting booth. We can go to the polling place. We can cast our votes. That's very important. Both things are very important. But how do we deconstruct the apparatus that allows this corruption to occur? And so this is what I want to talk about. And I want to talk about it in just a second. But first, I want to talk to you about Beam Organics. Did you know that poor sleep can cause weight gain, mood issues, poor mental health, and lower productivity? And that sleeping less than 6 to 7 hours per night is linked to reduced white blood cell count. Having a consistent nighttime routine is so important. Well, allow me to introduce to you Beam Dream. Beam is the world's most innovative, functional wellness brand with unique products for everything from sleep to recovery. And today, you, my listeners, get a special discount available for Beam's sleep product, Dream Powder, their best-selling healthy hot cocoa. It contains natural, sleep-promoting premium ingredients, triple lab-tested, no THC, of course, and you wake up refreshed. 98% of people surveyed fall asleep faster when taking Beam Dream, and 99% of people experience better sleep quality. And Beam's premium nano CBD dramatically increases your body's ability to absorb CBD, making their products the most effective in the wellness space. You just mix Beam Dream into hot water, milk, stir, and enjoy 30 minutes before bedtime. If you don't love it, you get your money back guaranteed. For a limited time, get $20 off when you go to beamorganics.com/Liz and use code Liz at checkout. That's BEAMorganics.com/Liz and use code Liz for $20 off at checkout. Okay, so how do we deconstruct this apparatus that allows corruption to this level? And whenever I sit here and analyze a problem, you first have to identify I first identify what is the problem. Let's define what is the problem, and then we can't create a solution until we have identified the what is itness of the problem. What is it? Let's define it. So part of the problem, of course, was rule breaking, irregularities, and other shady business that occurred at individual precincts in states across the country in 2020. And I'm not trying to be vague here. I'm not trying to appease the censorship of big tech here, but Margot Cleveland on The Federalist has an incredible article where she is introducing exclusively video proof of really serious irregularities in Pennsylvania precincts. This is what Cleveland writes at The Federalist. She says, the video and audio hits just keep on coming from Delaware County, Pennsylvania, where a whistleblower secretly taped the aftermath of the chaos from the 2020 presidential election. 2 recent recordings exclusively obtained by The Federalist from a source with knowledge of the recordings provide further evidence that systemic problems plague the large Pennsylvania county. Now, of course, remember the background of this is remember how critical Pennsylvania was to the outcome of the electoral count in 2020. We all know this. Cleveland says the newest recordings provide some of the frankest discussion on how bad the behind-the-scenes situation was, with one election worker describing a part of the post-election situation as abominable, and the attempt to do the impossible, reconcile some precincts' voter sheets as, quote, a nightmare. The whistleblower, Regina Miller, began recording conversations involving Delaware County officials after she became concerned with what she saw as a contract worker assisting election employees. A source familiar with the videos explained that Miller made the recordings as election workers scrambled to find and in some cases create documentation in response to a right-to-know request that sought copies of the paperwork that would confirm the accuracy of the vote tallies certified for the 2020 election. So let's just pause there for a second.
Unfortunately, I can't show you this part of the show, or the big tech overlords might delete this video and my channel. As you know, YouTube won't let me tell you the truth about COVID-19 or transgenderism and other important issues, even when I cite the specific studies. So if you want to watch the full uncensored version of this video, join me over on the Liz Wheeler Show community on Locals, lizwheelershow.com/locals.
So we're talking about this corruption apparatus. Now, a story like this would go a long way, or reporting like this, I should say. Reporting like this should go a long way to undermining the apparatus that allows corruption. Yet, we're not allowed to talk about this. And when I say we're not allowed to talk about this, obviously I'm sitting here talking about it with you right now, but big tech doesn't allow us to talk about election integrity. Anything that questions the integrity of the 2020 election, even reporting, even undercover videos, even the words of election workers themselves, testimony or undercover videos is disallowed on big tech platforms. Why? Because in order to protect corruption, you have to silence reality. You have to stifle the truth. You have to, and to do that, of course, requires censorship. So this censorship that we see at the hands of big tech isn't just an arbitrary, disgruntled, liberal individual who happens to work in the quality control department of YouTube or Twitter. No. This is a built apparatus, a large apparatus with a goal in mind, a very specific goal in mind, to protect the corrupt institutions that the left needs in order to get away with their law-breaking activity. Whether it's Hillary Clinton, look at how she walked by that video. Think about her posture in that video. That's not a woman who thinks she's going to go to jail. That's not a politician who understands that their corruption has been exposed and that they're going to be held accountable. That is the chilled soul of a criminal who knows she is above the law because she has a protective apparatus around her. Again, the what is it-ness of the problem has to come first before the solution. So if you look, like I said, I go back to what I said at the very beginning. Looking at this Durham filing, looking at this, it makes it impossible for any rational thinking adult individual, especially a conservative, to believe that this is just a bunch of liberal programmers, like I said, at YouTube or Twitter, tweaking conservatives that they don't like. No, this is not just bias. These are not isolated incidents. This is a concerted, deliberate plot to subvert our free and fair elections and take over our government. And some people might say, well, that's really hyperbolic. No, it is not hyperbolic when the evidence shows that that's true. There's a difference between a conspiracy theory and a conspiracy. The thing about conspiracies is sometimes conspiracies are true. We've seen this for ourselves. How much evidence does it take to convince even people in the Republican Party that the Democrats will, by hook or by crook, try to take Republicans down? We saw this with Trump-Russia allegations. We saw this with the so-called Ukraine whistleblower. We've seen this time and time again where Democrats have weaponized the government, the power of the federal government, to unfairly, criminally target or undermine, make false accusations that they know are false, plant evidence against a Republican because he's a Republican, even when he's a duly elected president of the United States. That is what you call a conspiracy. It was a concerted effort to try to take someone out based on false allegations. So again, it's impossible to believe that this is just, well, Silicon Valley's kind of liberal. I bet all of their programmers who write their algorithms have an individual bias, and the individual bias just happens to target conservatives. No, obviously not. Look at the extent. Again, talking about this apparatus, it's not one person, it's not two people, it's not one institution, two institution. It's an intertwined apparatus built specifically to protect corruption and lawbreaking. Look at the extent big tech is willing to censor conservatives. Again, this is not a coincidence. There's a really famous Twitter account, or a really popular conservative Twitter account called Defiant L's. You're all probably, anybody who's on Twitter is probably familiar with Defiant L's. Defiant L's doesn't actually tweet their own opinion. What Defiant L's does, and we can show this picture on the screen, is puts a comparison or juxtaposes two tweets from liberals to show their hypocrisy. So, for example, there was a mayoral candidate who was the subject of an assassination attempt in Louisville, Kentucky. It's a horrible story, truly horrible story. And the assassination attempt was committed by an activist named Quintez Brown. So back in 2019, Quintez Brown, who was actually worked for a newspaper in Louisville, Kentucky, which makes this an even wilder story, tweeted, "Kentucky's concealed carry law shows that your life doesn't matter to gun-loving Republicans." This individual, this is the headline from Quintez Brown. Okay, so fast forward to 2022, and this is the headline from the Courier-Journal, his newspaper. Activist Quintez Brown named in attempted shooting of Louisville mayor candidate Greenberg. Okay, so all of this is to say what Defiant L's, the Twitter account, does is, juxtaposes these two tweets. So we can see this on the screen right here. You can see that in the top is the tweet from Quintez Brown, this column that he wrote, blaming Republicans and guns for all the ills in our country. And then bottom is, well, Quintez Brown is now a suspect, or he's named in an attempted shooting. So what does this do? This exposes leftist hypocrisy. This exposes, woke elitism. This, exposes that the Democratic Party and Democratic operatives are corrupt. This is what Defiant L's does on Twitter. There's also, look at this one from about Justin Trudeau. In 2012, this is what Justin Trudeau tweeted: "When a government starts trying to cancel dissent or avoid dissent is when it's rapidly losing its moral authority to govern." And this was Trudeau quoting Stephen Harper, prime minister at the time, in 2005. So what did Defiant L's do? Defiant L's put that tweet at the top, and at the bottom shows Justin Trudeau's communism, where now he is tweeting. This was just 2 days ago on Valentine's Day, 3 days ago on Valentine's Day. Trudeau saying the ongoing blockades and occupations are presenting serious challenges to law enforcement's ability to effectively enforce the law. Because of that, the federal government is invoking the Emergencies Act to supplement provincial and territorial capacity. So what does this do? Obviously, this juxtaposes the idea that in 2005, or in 2012, Justin Trudeau is saying, only tyrants want to stifle dissent. Well, fast forward 10 years, and Justin Trudeau is a tyrant trying to stifle dissent. This is what this Twitter account does. There's a third example here, and in my opinion, this is probably the single tweet, the single graphic that got Defiant L's banned from Twitter. It's an unfair ban. Apparently, Twitter told the operator of this account that the violation was ban evasion, meaning if you have an account on Twitter and you're banned, and then you make another account, that's against the terms of service of Twitter. Once you're banned, you as a person are banned. It's not just your specific account or username. However, the operator of this account says that he's never had, he or she, I guess, I don't know who's behind it, that he's never had any accounts banned before. So the allegation from Twitter that he's just evading a ban it's BS. It's untrue. It's just Twitter's way of silencing him. But this is the tweet, I think, or the graphic, I think, it made the biggest difference. So Hillary Clinton in 2016 said, computer scientists, this is October 31st, 2016, so right before the election. Computer scientists have apparently uncovered a covert server linking the Trump organization to a Russian-based bank. Well, compare that to the 13th of February, 2022, Clinton campaign paid tech workers to dig up Trump-Russia connections, and it of course links to the Durham court filing. This is what this account does. This is not violating anybody's terms of service. This is not even opinion from Defiant L's, and yet big tech censors, completely bans, a permanent ban on Defiant L's. Again, this is not an isolated incident. This is not a disgruntled worker in big tech, a liberal bias in an algorithm that unintentionally targets conservatives. No, this is a concerted effort by big tech. So why does big tech need to do this? Why do they need to do this? The same holds true, by the way, for the mainstream media. The mainstream media, remember, back in 2016 and 2017 and 2018, the mainstream media cared about nothing more than they cared about Trump-Russia collusion. They wanted to know if there was a connection between Donald Trump and Russia. Actually, they didn't, let me rephrase that. They didn't want to know. They claimed definitively, without proof, that there was a corrupt connection between Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin. This was obviously based on the invented Steele dossier, which Hillary Clinton, again, paid to fund. And that's all the mainstream media cared about. But now when we have actual corruption related to those allegations that they were so obsessed with, they don't care at all. They've barely mentioned the biggest cable news channels, the biggest leftist cable news channels, I should say, do not care at all. They've barely covered it. So this is not, again, this is not an isolated bias at big tech. This is not an isolated dishonest newscaster at big media. This is not an isolated crook at the Department of Justice and the FBI. This is not even just Hillary Clinton. But first, I want to tell you about a sweet opportunity to win a chance at a signed picture from President Trump. With all the political pressure of the left that we're all experiencing, the woke mob, the fact that the woke mob has now become the Democrat Party, our society has ultimately become controlled by these cancel culture elites. That's what we're talking about today on the show. Since when have the founders of our Constitution, the American flag, Dr. Seuss, and many other things become un-American? This is according to the left. Well, there's never been a better time in our nation's history to stand up against this woke mob and fight back. You can do just that with this exclusive offer I'm giving to my listeners only for a limited time. Now is your chance to win a signed picture by President Trump himself. That's right. Not only will you be taking a stand against the radical left, you'll be entering to win a piece of history. All you have to do is text the word Liz, L-I-Z, to 55404. Do that today to enter. That's L-I-Z to 55404. Join me in standing up for President Trump and canceling the radical left once and for all. That's Liz to 55404. L-I-Z to 55404. It's fun. It's free. L-I-Z to 55404. This is paid for by the National Republican Senatorial Committee. Okay, so if we're thinking about this thought experiment, that what can we do? What can we as individuals do to dismantle this apparatus? We have to understand that the reason that we are experiencing big tech censorship, or the reason that we are experiencing mainstream media blackouts of stories, is, of course, to protect the corruption of the political elites on the left. Because without the censorship, without the blackouts from the mainstream media, without the bans, the prohibitions on our free speech, our discussions, our reporting on these stories on big tech, then the American people would be aware of what was happening. And regardless of what side of the aisle that we're on, Republicans and Democrats, liberals and conservatives, no one likes a corrupt politician. So, of course, these apparatuses, or this intertwined apparatus, has to be constructed to stifle the truth, to stifle reality. It's why, as I said, that we had to censor the first couple sentences of this show, because YouTube actually doesn't allow me to say what I said without the threat of being banned. They are so threatened, in fact, by that report or by that comment that they don't want anyone else to hear it, because they think if you hear it, if your friend hears it, if your neighbor hears it, if the Democrat down the street hears it, then they'll change their mind. They will start demanding accountability from the political elites. And so what do we do? What do we do in the face of this apparatus when it is such a strong structure built to protect this blatant law-breaking activity, these attacks on our democracy, this effort to subvert our republic and keep Democrats in power in perpetuity? What do we do? So I think there's a couple of solutions here. Big tech reform is obviously necessary. We must reform Section 230. We must enforce predatory monopoly laws in our country. Parler is a perfect example of this, where it wasn't just a matter of another big tech platform needs to compete with Twitter and Facebook and YouTube and Instagram, et cetera. But these platforms can't compete when the infrastructure, the underlying infrastructure, whether it's the operating systems of phones, Google Android or Apple iPhone, whether Amazon is the web hosting service for these websites, when the infrastructure underneath is part of the apparatus built to protect the left, then we have to enforce predatory monopoly laws so that competition can actually happen. We have to reform Section 230 because these big tech platforms are playing a role of an editor. They're playing a role of a publisher, not a platform. This is all obvious. We know this. I'm actually going to do a much longer piece on the exact steps that conservatives in Congress, our representatives, need to take in order to not just acknowledge the problem that is big tech, but to actually do something to fix it. There's a lot of talk in Congress, a lot of talk among conservatives about how much big tech is harming our country, how much this censorship is impacting in a negative way our political debate and our political apparatus. But there's not an agreement. There's not a solution that everyone has settled on, and everyone meaning in Congress. There's not a specific goal. There's a lot of people who have a lot of solutions, and we need to coalesce. We need to unite. We need a plan for action, and I'm almost ready to present that to you soon. We will be doing a whole episode on exactly what needs to be done about big tech. The thing is, though, big tech isn't the root of the problem. It's a symptom that enables the problem. The root of the problem is corrupt politicians. Corrupt politicians are enabled by, they're the deep state, right? They're enabled many times by the administrative state. The administrative state is an apparatus, a liberal apparatus that enables corruption because it expands the executive branch of the government, expands executive agencies filled with bureaucrats who have no accountability to voters. So Congress defers their legislative authority to the rulemaking powers of these agencies. The rulemakers in these agencies who don't face us, the voter, make these rules that really they have no right to do. Congress has no right to delegate their legislative power to the executive branch. This administrative state is enormous, it's bloated, and it is one of the things that allows this corruption to happen. We saw this at the Department of Justice. We saw this at the FBI. We saw this in the CIA and the NSA. We see this in these executive agencies, and we must address this. We must abolish the administrative state. Part of that happens at the judicial level. Part of that happens at the legislative level. We have to outlaw Congress deferring their power to these executive agencies, to these administrative state agencies. Big tech, of course, covers for all of this, which is why we have to address that with big tech reform. But there's a third part of this that conservatives don't talk about. There's a third part of this that is actually crucial to Democrats like Hillary Clinton getting away with what she does, not facing accountability, not even fearing accountability. You saw that video. Did she look frightened? Did she look like she had the weight of the world on her shoulders? Did she look guilty? Well, she didn't look like she felt guilty because she knows she's not going to face accountability. So the third part of this is the mainstream media. The reason conservatives don't want to talk about this is because we conservatives tend to be free speech absolutists, and perhaps as we should be in general. It's a good philosophy to have. We don't want government telling us what we can and can't say. But the mainstream media or big media, the corporate media, the leftist media, they enjoy an immunity from defamation. And what I mean by that is there's a long history of defamation law in our country, and even before our country in Britain, where we got most of our laws from. And it's an interesting gray area to talk about defamation law versus free speech law and how it's gotten twisted in modern America to allow the mainstream media to play this role in covering up corruption. I want to dig into this in just a second, but first I want to talk to you about my Patriot Supply. Friends, one of the biggest problems that all Americans will face in 2022 is runaway food prices. I'm talking sky-high inflation. It's hitting everywhere. It's hitting everyone hard already. Imagine how much worse it's going to get. But I have a solution you're going to love. Get yourself some long-term storage emergency food from My Patriot Supply. My Patriot Supply is America's largest emergency food provider. Hands down, this is the most affordable way to buy emergency food. The food is delicious. Also, I know my husband and I keep a store of backup food. We are, in a sense, preppers, especially my husband. Get the 4-week emergency food kit. This includes breakfast, lunch, dinner, drinks, and snacks. Right now, you can save $50 on each 4-week kit that you order if you go to my URL. My URL is preparewithliz.com. Preparewithliz.com. So what you'll want to do is you'll want to pick up one kit for each person in your family, and then you'll be able to laugh at the sky-high food prices or even the shortages that we see of food at the grocery store. Don't wait. Go to preparewithliz.com right now. That's preparewithliz.com. We should not let the Biden administration impact our families so negatively. That is preparewithliz.com. Okay, so this third aspect, we obviously have the administrative state, which is where corruption grows, these bureaucrats in their executive agencies. We have big tech who, well, censors for them, who covers for them, trying to stifle the truth from being disseminated. But then we have this third issue, and this is the mainstream media, because the mainstream media doesn't just censor. They don't just silence, they don't just stifle the way that big tech does. The mainstream media does something actually worse. They perpetuate lies. They perpetuate the corruption. They spread, well, to use President Trump's term, there's no better term, they spread fake news. They actually spread fake news. So you have this apparatus then, this trifecta of the corrupt politicians, big tech, and the mainstream media, and we have a solution for the corrupt politicians, abolish the administrative state. We have a solution for big tech, Section 230 reform, enforce predatory monopoly laws. But what is the solution to the mainstream media? Because free speech is free speech. A free press is a free press. These are critically important elements to a republic, a working republic like we have. How do we prevent the mainstream media from serving as a propaganda arm? How do we prevent them from telling just abject lies that they know are lies about politicians and about events, whether it's January 6th, whether it's the Russia collusion, whether it's the 2020 election? How do we stop them from disseminating falsehoods that they know are false? Well, again, I think about this. I pull this back and forth in my mind, and I think, okay, well, there's competing interests. There's the interest of free speech and a free press, and there's the interest of individuals having a right not to suffer from defamation. This goes back to what I said about defamation law. There's a long history of defamation law being defamation law, even and married to the interest of having free speech. These things are not mutually exclusive. You can have defamation law, you can have protections against slander and libel, and still enjoy free speech. And we have for hundreds and hundreds of years, both now and before the United States, in the law that we brought from Britain, common law in Britain. And so I had an extremely interesting conversation with Senator Ted Cruz about the case law that's underlying to our defamation laws, because there is a case called New York Times versus Sullivan. It's a libel law, or it's a libel suit that the New York Times was defending against, in which the Supreme Court raised the bar for what constitutes slander or libel if the individual who is being defamed is in the public eye, which is interesting, because this is a new standard that the Supreme Court invented, and it makes it almost impossible to enforce defamation laws against the media if they are slandering or if they are committing libel against public figures. And this video has not even been, this conversation I had with Senator Cruz hasn't even been published yet on Verdict Plus. I want to give you, my viewers, a sneak peek of just a little bit of this discussion, because it's crucially important to how we fight the fight against this leftist apparatus that wants to subvert our republic. Take a listen to this.
Okay, so that's all the factual background. What's the legal standard? The legal standard for a libel case against a journalist who has defamed a public figure is a standard that comes from a landmark Supreme Court case called New York Times versus Sullivan. And so actually the New York Times has been litigating these cases a long time. New York Times versus Sullivan set a heightened standard for defamation of a public figure. What's a public figure? A public figure is someone who runs for office, someone who consciously makes the choice to be in the public eye. And the Supreme Court created this new standard that said, look, defamation law had been around for centuries. Defamation law existed long before we had a First Amendment. Defamation law existed in English common law. But the Supreme Court, New York Times versus Sullivan, was written by Justice Brennan. And he invented this heightened standard that said to bring a lawsuit, for a public figure to bring a lawsuit against a journalist, you had to demonstrate actual malice. So not negligence, not that you were grossly negligent even, but actual malice. And they defined actual malice as either recklessness to whether or not what you're saying is true or false, or actual knowledge that it's false. And so it's a really high standard of knowledge that is required on the part of the journalist.
Again, we really nerded out on this conversation. It was great. He obviously knows a ton about this. You can join Verdict Plus to watch the entire discussion start to finish. I think it was 25 minutes. It was a really great discussion. To view it as soon as it comes out, you can go to verdictwithtedcruz.com/plus. You can use the promo code Cloakroom for a 1-month free trial on your annual subscription. Highly recommend that you watch this. I really enjoyed it because it really made clear that this standard for defamation against public figures is higher. It's invented. It's higher. It's different than it is for the standard to prove defamation against just an everyday citizen, if you will, because you have to prove malice. And how do you prove malice? Unless someone is stupid enough to write in an email, I'm intentionally saying a mean thing and I deliberately know that it's spreading a falsehood, which maybe there are Democrats idiotic enough to leave that kind of paper trail, but it's not going to be as common as you think. It's very difficult, in other words, to prove malice. So the question for conservatives is, should this standard, this elevated standard that to defame a public figure, you have to prove malice, should this be the standard? Or is it time to revisit this precedent that we have in our country that there is an elevated standard to defame public officials? And I perhaps would argue that this is the third element to deconstruct this corrupt apparatus that the Democratic Party and the left has constructed in our country. We can address the administrative state. We can address big tech censorship. But to address the dissemination of the lies that underpin the corruption, that actually enable the corruption to be alive, they give lifeblood to the corruption. The mainstream media's lies are critical to that, and their lies are defamatory. Their lies are, think about the things they said about President Trump. They accused him of being a traitor, and they knew this was false. And yet, should they be allowed to say that because of free speech? Or does that constitute defamation to the point that it's ruining someone's reputation, ruining someone's character based on what they know is a malicious lie? So I would argue that it is time to revisit New York Times versus Sullivan, because this might be the key to fighting back against this corrupt apparatus, because it is a trifecta, and you can address one, you can address two, but if you don't address all three prongs of it, then the corruption will most likely continue. It will most likely continue, but I'd love to know your thoughts on New York Times versus Sullivan. Again, you can go to verdictwithtedcruz.com/plus and watch the full discussion. You can go to my locals community, lizwheelershow.com/locals, and talk to me about it there. You can try to talk to me about it on Big Tech, but I can't guarantee that they won't shut you right down or shut me down. Thank you for watching today. Thank you for listening. I'm Liz Wheeler. This is The Liz Wheeler Show.
The Liz Wheeler Show is produced by Jonathan Hay, executive producer Chad Abbott, director of photography Kevin McRoberts, editor Alejandro Figuerella, sound mixer Robin Fenderson, director of marketing Emily Washler, production and talent coordinator Matt Toffler, and senior publicist Patricia Jackson. This has been a Soundfront production.
If you haven't already, give this video a thumbs up, hit the subscribe button below, and ring the bell to make sure you never miss a video.